What happens when a lone tenant's fight against gang terror turns into a digital rebellion, igniting a firestorm of courage, secrets, and the perilous cost of truth? Welcome to the surreal circus of our lives, where the main act is standing between monstrous gang leaders and crumbling drywall. I still remember the first morning I took a hard look at what lay beyond the delicate veil of normalcy. On a bright Tuesday, as I shuffled to the mailbox, I stumbled onto a group of gangbangers lounging in the stairwell like it was a beachfront resort. Their laughter echoed eerily, dancing above the wooden railings. "I guess I missed the memo on Gangster Beach week," I muttered under my breath, masking my confusion with wry cynicism. This was not merely a blip on the radar. It was a full-blown invasion. Their crude jokes mixed with the scent of cheap cologne and something more sinister, a foul whiff of intimidation. It became immediately clear that I'd have to become a digital Houdini, using technology as my magic wand to unravel this horror show. The children once frolicked in our courtyard, and my neighbors exchanged pleasantries over the decades, but now they were shadows of their former selves. They cringed at the echoing footfalls of our self-appointed security detail and whispered tales of Tito the Shark. If fear was contagious, it had spread faster than an epidemic. I could see its grips on my neighbors. Eyes lowered, hushed voices, an entire building paralyzing under an invisible yoke. "Come on, people. We're not props in some low-budget thriller," I thought, motivation curling tightly around my spine. It was time to marshmallow my righteous fury with smarts and take action. With a trusty laptop and Maya's fiery spirit beside me, we concocted a plan that felt dangerously like some clandestine caper. While I labeled the gathering shadows as an ongoing horror story, she looked at it through the eyes of an investigative journalist, wielding a pen sharper than any knife. Together, we crawled through social media tunnels, scouting connections, searching for threads that would unravel the entire chaotic tapestry wrapped around our lives. Every tweet, every Instagram post, every comment was a potential clue, like breadcrumbs leading us to the heart of the monster. After a whole night spent diving into the depths of the dark web, we unearthed names, connections, and the underlying rot that glued this gang to our building. The only thing more unsettling than exposure is the sheer joy I take in watching their empires collapse. I joked, but deep down, fire was quickly replacing fear. Armed with our treasure trove of intel, we knew that it was showtime. I had planned a midnight expose session where we would stream the truths we unearthed live, illuminating every crack and crevice in Tito's reign. The only remaining question was Pandora's box. Would my neighbors rally behind us, or would they shrink back further into the shadows? That night, we propped my laptop on a battered kitchen table, surrounded by the tension of a dark comedy. The lighting flickered as I took a moment to glance around the room, tempted to dry swallow my nerves. Would they sharpen their talons, or would I stand alone as the lone warrior against the tide of terror? An electric wave danced across the room as Maya gripped my arm, her warmth a reminder that not all candles were about to be snuffed out. With our hearts pounding like jackhammers, we went live, broadcasting the horror and utter absurdity that had swallowed our lives whole. I launched into a monologue that felt like it pierced through the chaos. I told the world about Tito's minions, about the graffiti that proclaimed their domain, and about the lawless nights. The comments section exploded, morphing into a battleground of outrage. "This is the beginning of the end," I shouted, the dramatic tone ticking at the minds of spectators as disbelief morphed into righteous fury. My heart worked overtime as the fear in my bones transformed into adrenaline. Let's show them they can't take our home without a fight. Somehow, seeing people connect with our plight made it all worth it. We lit that spark of courage despite the proximity of danger and the looming threat of retaliation. But just as my energy peaked, a dire notification flashed on screen like a cheetah stalking an unsuspecting gazelle. An ominous comment pierced through the cheers. "I can't wait to see what Liam the loser has planned for his next failure." It was a reminder that not everyone was on our side, that shadows still thrived back home, and lurking within them was fear personified. My pulse quickened. The dark humor wasn't enough to mask my realization that Tito might be watching, lurking behind a flickering screen, plotting our downfall. Irony, the bitter yet sweet flavor of fate, left me pondering. Had I just signed my own death warrant? There was no turning back now. There was only forward momentum. As I looked at Maya, the determination emanating from her warm brown eyes mirrored the resolve swelling in my chest. I could feel a storm brewing overhead. Justice wasn't just a dusty concept. It was a raging wild beast waiting to decimate lies and twist injustice. Tito and his gang were about to contend with something they never expected. A tenant uprising fueled by righteous fury and unbending truth. Who knew that our apartment building, the ramshackle fortress of despair, could transform into the front line of a battle? With every keystroke and every share, we were lighting cigarettes in a powder keg. If they thought they could take control easily, they were about to learn the hard way. Did they take us for sheep? Or were we wolves in the making? Only time would tell. The comments continued to roll in, each one a spark flaring against the gasoline of my fury. They ranged from supportive exclamations to scathing insults, a testament to the polarized world that had blossomed amidst our despair. Liam the loser? I scoffed incredulously, my finger hovering just over the keyboard, ready to unleash a barrage of retorts like a general firing cannons in battle. But I caught myself. Reacting wouldn't help. Instead, I pinned my focus on the night's mission. The live stream was a fortress of shared hope, the digital barricade against the looming darkness of titanic gang power. With every fresh comment that swirled across the screen, I could practically feel the strength brewing beneath our collective outrage, a mutually sensed desire for justice that was as intoxicating as it was inevitable. "Let's turn this tide once and for all," I shouted, channeling that energy into my voice, while my heart thudded like a war drum. Meanwhile, as we broadcasted our nerve-wracking revelation, I noticed a shift in the ambiance of our gathering. Murmurs of solidarity transformed into resonant proclamations of intent from our fellow tenants. One by one, faces graced the screens as neighbors interjected their own experiences with Tito's gang, a discursive explosion of fear fused with the spirit to fight back. "I once lost my job because of their intimidation tactics," shouted Mrs. Rivera, the retired teacher who had lived here since before my parents were born. Her eyes, once dimmed by terror, now sparked with indignation. Each voice that chimed in was a stone tossed into the pond of our defiance, each story rippling outward and generating waves of shared unity. It was almost poetic, a chaotic choir singing in unison against our common oppressor. "You know, I thought I'd only find misery living here, but instead, I'm finding a revolution," I quipped, managing to inject a bit of dark humor into the serious business at hand, earning myself a wave of laughter and applause from our digital gathering. But just then, reality crashed back in like a speeding train. A notification alarm echoed, filling the room with a pulse-pounding dread. The comment had resurfaced, reloaded like an ominous gun in a horror flick. "Your little rebellion will end in blood, Liam the loser." It sent shivers down my spine, plummeting my excitement like a lead weight. My finger momentarily froze over the keyboard, and I stole a glance at Maya, who was biting her lip, the corners of her mouth trembling with frustration. This was no longer just a digital protest or an exposé of chaos. I could feel the fabric of our lives being stretched dangerously thin. "We're not just broadcasting our truth, we're also painting a target with bold strokes," I muttered, the humor evaporating like morning mist. If Tito was paying attention, we might just be dancing on the edge of a razor blade. But retreating now was not an option. We had the momentum. All that was left was to push forward and stir the pot even more. Fueled by rising concern, I took one deep breath, borrowing strength from the brave souls I had rallied that night. "Listen up. We're not falling into fear's old trap. They want us cowering in our shadows. But we are the storm that's about to reshape this neighborhood." As the impassioned statements poured out of me, the wonderful chaos of camaraderie ignited our collective spirit again. I invited my fellow tenants to join in, each one unearthing their stories, their truths, and their grievances, like rusted swords coming out of hibernation. "Tito thinks he can claim dominion over us. Think again. We are reclaiming our home, one truth at a time." The chat exploded with echoes of agreement, and a sense of power surged through the air, lifting our spirits from the gut-wrenching uncertainty that had kept us awake at night. With each voice that rose, Our once feared apartment building transformed back into a sanctuary that could stand its ground. But we needed to bolster our forces. The night sped ahead like a freight train barreling through, and we continued to expose the blistering truths of our living circumstances. I felt like an interloper in an epic movie, with scenes unfolding in real time. The adrenaline surged, propelling us to reach deeper into Tito's territory. Networks, connections, and aliases materialized like dark specters before us, each one dodging the law as we turned over digital rocks in our investigation. "Look at this, Maya. He's linked to several deals in the area," I proclaimed triumphantly, waving my laptop with an excitement that might have bordered on frenzy. "This is it. We might finally have the leverage we need." With each bite of evidence we compiled, the chances of exposing not just Tito, but the entire insidious infrastructure that breathed life into his reign of terror appeared more tangible. Justice was akin to a freight train of its own now, unstoppable, roaring towards its destination. However, just as I reveled in our progress, uncertainty crawled back into my mind like a cockroach skirting around a dark room. What if this served as a wake-up call to Tito? What if he retaliated against us directly? The gravity of potential consequences set in, casting shadows long and threatening over my exhilaration. The flinching faces of my neighbors loomed in my mind. Mrs. Rivera, a retiree with a garden she cherished. The young couple expecting a baby on the second floor. They didn't deserve to be collateral damage in this war against tyranny. How could I risk their safety? The righteous fire flickered deep within me, battling against the cold pang of selfishness. There, in the dim light of my kitchen, surrounded by my allies and spirited revolutionaries, I stood at the precipice. If we crossed that line, there would be no turning back. Could I, would I, let fear of retaliation keep me shackled? With a deep breath, I looked at Maya, gravitating towards her steadfast determination. I sensed her unwavering belief that this was a battle worth fighting, for dignity, for our homes, and for everyone who had been muted in fear. "It's past time for a reckoning," I declared, feeling the urgency of right now seep through the cracks of indecision. Each passing moment stole away chances of change. We're already on borrowed time. Let's expose Tito and his empire. Let's elevate our voices loud enough to shatter the walls of oppression that have held us captive. As my words echoed around the cramped kitchen, it was igniting the spark of solidarity I had only momentarily feared. Who knew how far our revolt could spread? Together, could we build a monumental force, capable of dismantling the chaos that had dared to lay claim to our lives? Were we ready to turn back, or would we burst forth from this moment in glorious rebellion? Only determination could tell. With reborn energy pulsating through my veins like charged lightning, I leaned in closer, my laptop flickering with exhilarating possibilities. "Maya, check this out," I exclaimed, my voice rising, as if I were announcing a championship victory. There, splashed across the digital landscape, were Tito's illicit business dealings, a tangled web of deception that sprawled across the city like some grotesque spider's dinner. Look, he's been moving thousands in cash through some shady businesses. Small-time restaurants, laundromats, flipping them for drug mules and money laundering. It's practically a buffet of crime. My excitement felt like a jolt of caffeine, lighting up every dark corner of my mind, which had previously been consumed by dread. Each new detail shouted injustice from the screen, beckoning me to dive deeper into the rabbit hole. The chat exploded with real-time reactions as my neighbors absorbed the dismal truth. One by one, they pounced like hawks at a buffet of fresh information, bouncing ideas around, rallying against the beast that had terrorized us for so long. "Should we get local press involved?" Mrs. Rivera chimed in, her voice clashing fiercely with the trepidation of her earlier self. "What if we create a petition?" piped up Thomas from the third floor, who had always struck me as the quiet type. It was surreal, like watching ashes rise from a fire long thought extinguished, our collective outrage crackling back to life. "Yes," I shouted, feeling the weight of camaraderie pressing down upon me, reassuring and magnificent. "Let's build forward momentum. We need this information out there. Enough is enough." With every voice a brick laid upon the road towards our liberation, It felt like we were making history before the pixels of our screens. But as the energy in the room buzzed like an electrical storm, a shadow of doubt began to creep back in, an insidious little voice, reminding me of who we were truly up against. And who was at the helm of this chaos? Tito, an abstract villain in our digital brawl, yes. But the encounters his gang had thrust upon us were very real. Images of his sharp teeth glowing under dim lights, eyes like ice piercing through flesh, replayed in the theater of my mind. "We need to prepare for consequences," I reminded the group, a not-so-encouraging comment that cast a slight pall over our newfound zeal. "He won't take kindly to this level of exposure. We're crossing into his territory, and it's dangerous." They could retaliate. A hush settled over our digital congregation, the hopeful flames momentarily stifled by an anxiety-laden truth. Maya's expression remained focused, her brow pinching in thought. "But Liam, if we let fear guide us, we're giving them the power to silence us." Her eyes shimmered with a defiance that unfolded like a flag ultimately raised for battle. "Tito and his crew have been taking liberties with our lives for too long. This might be our only chance, and it's clear we have each other's backs." She swept her hands through the air, as if attempting to physically shield our digital arena from harm. I felt her passion weave itself within me, stoking the flame of recklessness I had been nurturing since this nightmare began. As the waves of our forming strategy crashed against the rocky banks of fear, each word and plan felt like a new caliber of artillery, sharper, deadlier, rewarding us for the calculated risks. "Let's create an anonymous tip line and compile a collective report," I announced, adrenaline heightening my conviction. "By pooling our evidence, we can make a case that no one can ignore. They are strong, but together we have the power of truth on our side." A rousing cheer cascaded through the chat as hearts danced back into rhythm. Every click of keys resonated with gritty determination. Every willing soul was yet another piece of this powerful puzzle. With Maya beside me in this crusade, the energy shifted again, boldness twisting into our newfound identities, daredevils of our own destinies. But reality still loomed like a storm cloud overhead, stirring my insides with fearsome uncertainty. "We need a plan," I reiterated, my tone level but urgent. "If we're drawing attention to Tito, we need to cover our tracks too." The consequences of our awakening were as tangible as the demands for justice ringing across the room. And how do we prepare for Tito's wrath? Someone posed the ever-hovering question, the harbinger of the dread that trailed us like a dense fog. A deep breath steadied my racing heart, and I rallied my thoughts. We must be strategic. Talk about this among trusted friends, but don't deal the cards until we're ready to play. We're not taking blind shots at the monster. This is calculated warfare. As conversations settled into focused action items, I felt an unexpected sense of camaraderie tinged with anxiety. In a bizarre twist, feeling panic seemed like queer fuel, driving our tenacity into sharper focus. We weren't just battling a gang, we were confronting the harsh reality that had been altering our lives quietly yet viciously for too long. I took a moment to look around the apartment, still swirling with chaos, but alight with unity. All it took was a spark of willingness, the intrinsic desire for justice that had, until now, quietly festered in the shadows. We weren't alone. An army had formed from our siloed fears, and together we would unearth the sinister truths lurking behind curtain after curtain. I smiled as the chatter transformed into tactical discussions, but a shadow still hung over my heart. Tito was not one to be trifled with. Even as we armed ourselves with the might of our collective voices, I couldn't shake the palpable tension in the air, pregnant with possibilities. "Together, we've got this," I announced, bravely firing a dent into the swirling mist of doubt that wrapped around me. "Hand in hand, we stand against his brutality. Are we ready to let the world know what's going down in our neck of the woods?" The room erupted with shouts of affirmation, rallying further around the idea that we weren't just tenants. We were forces of nature, unstoppable and fierce. Holding steadfast to our conviction felt empowering. Only the dawn awaited us, and with it, the clarity of justice. A week had passed since we ignited the flames of resistance in our apartment building, and the air was thick with tension. Each creak of floorboards, Every sound of a door slamming made my heart race like a crazed stallion. We'd gathered intel, prepared our words, and armed ourselves with strategy, but I felt an unease hovering like a storm cloud threatening to unleash its wrath at any moment. Tito. The Shark Gonzalez wasn't just some lackluster caricature. He was a sharp-dressed predator lurking in the murky depths of our lives. The scariest part? His stranglehold on our community was tightening, and we were poised to raise the stakes. Every glare exchanged in the hallway felt like a silent confirmation that we were in this together. But whisperings of danger rustled through the shadows, our collective pulse quickening at the thought of what retaliation could look like. In our strategy sessions, Maya led the charge with the ferocity of a general rallying their troops before the battle. "We've got to make this public," she insisted, her eyes wide with that wild mix of passion and pragmatism that I had grown to admire. "The more people that know, the less emboldened Tito can become." I nodded fervently, but as the wheels of my mind turned, I couldn't shake the image of his twisted smirk darkening our every step. "You know, it's not really lawful to expose a ruthless gang leader without some form of a witness protection program," I interjected, throwing in a darkly humorous undertone meant to ease the bubbling anxiety. "We'd be less like vigilantes and more like piñatas at a birthday party, bound to get smashed if we're not careful." Despite my mockery, fear churned in my gut. Tension filled the room. My fellow tenants subtly shared worried glances, each one echoing my own silent hope that we really were ready to face the beast. The big day came swiftly, almost too swiftly for my liking. Armed with a trove of evidence and a flickering sense of adrenaline, we gathered in our little makeshift war room, the community center, a versatile space that had borne witness to countless forgotten meetings. I set my laptop up, the screen alight with incriminating data about Tito's operations. As we prepared for the press conference, a creeping doubt began to seize my heart, squeezing tightly like a vice. Here we were, ordinary folks ready to unleash the floodgates of truth against a man who could snap his fingers and unleash chaos. What if Tito sees this? What if he retaliates? Then what? My voice wavered, fear spilling over unbidden. It was in that moment Maya stepped up, her eyes fierce. "If we stay in the shadows, we lose. We face him openly, and together we stand." Her unwavering conviction snapped up my resolve like a jolt of electricity. Pulsing with that kind of reckless courage, we filed out of the community center and into the harsh glare of reality. But nothing prepared me for the sight that greeted us. A slick black SUV sat ominously across the street, a silhouette I recognized all too well. "Oh, look, it's my favorite shark, waiting to gnaw off our limbs," I mumbled, sarcasm seeping from my lips as hopelessness dwindled in the backdrop. I felt the weight of 100 sets of eyes resting on my shoulders, each brimming with a cocktail of fear and determination. "Stay calm," I urged them, my voice steadier than I felt inside. "We have a job to do, and nothing will deter us. Just remember, a shark can't bite when its fin is out of the water." Accompanied by nervous laughter, we picked up the pace, our feet pounding against the pavement like heartbeats in a shared pulse of solidarity. Our makeshift press conference was set to unfold in the courtyard, an area Tito's crew had deemed as their turf. The representatives from the local news outlet arrived, antennas fully extended and notepads poised for the grand revelation. Maya took the lead, her eloquent fervor captivating. My job was merely to present the evidence, a curated list of Tito's salacious endeavors that had turned our home into a den of vice. "Liam, you're next," she gestured as she stepped aside, and my heart dropped. Glancing at the darkened SUV just a hair's breadth away, my mind raced. Would we actually make it through this? I flashed a glance at my neighbors, each face reflecting the blend of hope and fear that mirrored my own. Recognizing the resolve etched into our community, I pressed forward into the lion's den, offering proof of our sordid reality with a trembling voice that belied the fire scorching through my veins. But just as I found my rhythm, articulating the depths of the corruption that had seeped into our homes, the chill of dread returned like a biting winter wind. From the shadows, visible now through the curtain of anxious faces peeking around corners, Tito himself emerged, gliding toward us with a menacing confidence. "Let me guess, he drawled, his voice a silky whisper laced with venom. "You all decided to play vigilante? How adorably naive." My blood ran colder than ice, but Maya stepped into the fray, her intrepid spirit glimmering defiantly. "This ends now, Tito. You don't own our lives," she declared, her voice echoing like thunder, breaking the petrified silence. "What's adorably naive is thinking you can intimidate us anymore." The contrast in our energies felt electric. A ragtag bunch of tenants fortified with rage against the opulence and arrogance that bore down on us like a Goliath flipping its proverbial finger. I would not waver. After all this time spent navigating the depths of our despair, I knew we had reached an undeniable turning point. "This is our moment," I shouted, galvanizing the crowd. The wave of collective defiance surged through our little army, each roar of anger and outrage coursing through the crowd, setting aflame a determination that enlivened the air. Together, we take our lives back. Tito's smirk crumbled, and in that fleeting moment, it felt like we might just turn the tide of this battle. Would he retreat into the shadows or strike back harder than before? Only time would reveal the depths of his fury. A tense silence fell over the courtyard, thick enough to slice through with a knife, as Tito's chilling presence electrified the air. He stood there, a living embodiment of menace, every inch of him resonating with a power play of arrogance that made my blood boil. Without missing a beat, he sized us up, his blue eyes glimmering with predatory amusement. "A little press conference in your playground? How cute. But do you really think shouting louder will drown out real power?" A ripple of murmuring spread through the crowd, but I could feel the pulse of defiance thrumming beneath the surface, ready to erupt with each passing second. If this guy wanted a showdown, he clearly hadn't considered the army of discontent he'd unwittingly nurtured. Fueled by a cocktail of adrenaline and outrage, I stepped up, thrusting my voice above the din. "Tito, you've confused our silence for weakness. A community united is a fortress you can't breach." The words shot out like bullets, raw and unfiltered. My heart raced as I surveyed our ragtag crowd, every face reflecting a mixture of fear and renewed hope, their eyes shimmering with an electric charge. At that moment, it felt as if the weight of our lives, our homes, and our dignity rested on every syllable I dared to speak. With the collective spirit of my neighbors culminating at the base of my spine, we stood at the precipice of change. The narrative of fear was shifting, and we were the authors now. Just as I thought the tides had turned firmly in our favor, Tito's lips curled into a devious grin. "United? Is that what you call a bunch of scared rabbits huddled together? Tell me, does your courage extend to risks, or just rhetoric?" His smugness dripped like venom, a calculated affront that sent a surge of rage through me. "Enough!" shouted Maya, stepping into the spotlight beside me, igniting a fresh wave of support from our neighbors. "This is our home. Who gives you the right to terrorize us? We've documented your underhanded dealings." She flashed a stack of police reports and newspaper clippings to punctuate her words. The sight of that danger sent shockwaves this way and that. People lightly gasped, eyes fish-eyeing in agreement, creating the kind of momentum we weren't sure still existed. Suddenly, the laughter from the crowd morphed into a roar of indignation as Tito's facade began to crack. "You think this is a fairy tale?" he jeered. But the trepidation began to seep into his confidence like ink spreading through water, staining everything. "You really want to go toe-to-toe with me? I don't play by the rules. You'll learn that the hard way." I could practically hear the ominous undertone of his threats slithering through the air, but the fire inside me sparked brighter. This wasn't just about confronting a bully anymore. It was about reclaiming our community and power from the hands of a predator who thrived on fear. Fueled by the courage from my fellow tenants, I retorted, "You've underestimated us. We may not be armed with flashy tokens, but we're equipped with truth and courage. You've bullied us long enough." Each word dripped with every ounce of pent-up frustration, a culmination of sleepless nights and helplessness that refused to bow. The urgency of this moment illuminated everything like a damn spotlight, and suddenly I felt it, a resonance of possibility, a symphony of collective spirit ready to drown out Tito's dark opera. The escalating energy coursed through the crowd like wildfire, our fears transformed into impassioned resolve. With every syllable echoing in the crisp air, I could see the energy gusting between us, the crowd leaning forward, hands raised in solidarity, fueled by a sense of inevitability. We were no longer just battered tenants. We were warriors reclaiming our homes. Tito let out a bitter laugh. The bravado of it all made it clear he hadn't prepared for this level of resistance. As if sensing the ground beneath him quake, he took a step back, shifting uneasily. This was the moment where the balance tipped, where the narrative began to right itself. No longer were we the scared rabbits, but rather a united front belligerently standing their ground. As the confrontation reached its apex, I felt an exhilarating rush course through me, pushing me to the forefront. Let's be real. You may throw community members around like toys, but I won't let you bury our truth in the dirt. Your empire of fear is crumbling. Every breath felt like a clarion call, a shifting current we were steering, one that could very well uproot the history of terror that Tito tried so desperately to maintain. The crowd roared in agreement, every voice a layer to our battle anthem. Hadn't we all had enough? Hadn't the whispers of fear turned into defiant roars demanding justice at long last? Before decisions could solidify into solid ground, that ominous black SUV seemed to draw closer, like a dire omen ready to pounce. As Tito's eyes narrowed, darkening into slits of calculation, I couldn't help but wonder, was this the tipping point? Would we truly be able to take down a man who thrived on intimidation and control? Or was this merely a sinking ship disguised as rebellion? The dread lurked at the edges, swirling around me like a tempest, turning my gut into a pit of uncertainty. But one thing rang clear. No matter the outcome, we wouldn't back down. Exposing the inequality wasn't just goal anymore. It was our mission, our journey to take back our lives. Would this be the moment of undeniable triumph, or a plunge into chaos? Only time would reveal what the future held for us. The moment wobbled precariously on the edge of rebellion and retaliation. Instinctively, I felt the sweat trickle down my brow, exacerbated by the tension in the air that thickened like a noxious fog surrounding us. Tito, sensing his hold slipping just ever so slightly, began pacing, an unsettling predator preparing for one last gambit. "Boys," he barked, drawing a line in the sand, and for a heart-stopping second, I thought we might lose the momentum we had just gained. The gang members behind him loomed like dark clouds, menacing, aggressive, itching for a signal to act. This was the precise moment when fledgling courage could wilt under the glare of intimidation, and the crowd held its collective breath, teetering on a knife edge of fear. But then I glanced at Maya, her eyes ablaze with defiance, and suddenly I knew. We weren't backing down. "See?" I boomed, channeling that flicker of bravery and determination into a sound wave that rippled through the gathered tenants. They can't stand as men when your voices resonate with truth and solidarity. They're scared, just like we are. But you know what? Little puppies often bark the loudest to mask their own insecurities. I triumphantly pointed to Tito, who was now fuming, his face flushed with a mixture of rage and disbelief. If he thought he was the king of nightmares, he needed a new reality check. As his smug confidence faded, I dared to look beyond the gang, to the mix of neighbors standing with me, an unbreakable line of humanity rising to the occasion, determined to take our lives back from the grips of the fearmongers. As wild laughter erupted from the crowd, the darkness around us morphed. It became a tide of collective resolve smashing against the shoreline of Tito's bravado. It was beautiful in its violent purity. Your threats are as hollow as your gentility. Your empire of crime is built on fear, and fear is starting to look a lot like mouse droppings here, I chanted, minting the very idea of our unity into a mantra. Each snicker, each shout of agreement, was like pouring gasoline on a flickering flame. The embers of our resistance surged into an unapologetic blaze. You could practically sense the tide of our spirits shift like a hurricane turning toward land, the anticipation electrifying. Who was he to mock us? Who was he to decide our value? Then, out of the chaos of voices, I saw it, Tito's masked arrogance, peeling away like skin off a rotten fruit. "You think you can win this pointless struggle?" he spat, all fiery bravado and tight fists. You're just clowns in a circus I control. I'm the lion tamer, the alpha predator. But I intercepted his ravings with an outburst of my own, unflinching in the moment when he needed to paw the ground for dominance that was already fading. And the clowns have decided to stop performing now. If you're going to tame us, maybe you should know we're a pack of wild beasts who've had enough of your show. I felt invincible, and the crowd surged behind me, a roar of laughter and approval sweeping like a tidal wave against the dock of his insecurity. That's when it all fell apart for Tito. A spark ignited somewhere deep inside the red haze of his fury, and suddenly his blue eyes flickered uncertainly. "Your little charade won't work? I'll always be in control," he shouted. But it was a desperate echo, like a bird trying to squawk its way out of an impossible cage. An irate protest erupted from the crowd, synchronizing like a drumbeat, where our hearts beat in unison. Maya grabbed my arm, her enthusiasm radiating through me. People began stepping forward, some tossing empty soda cans in defiance, others filming with their phones, like we'd become the stars of our own reality show. This bravado turned into an uprising. The chips were tumbling off the table, and all I could think was, this has to be our moment. Then, out of nowhere, several police cars pulled up, blue lights slicing through the dark night like a beacon of justice. Talk about perfect timing. Hushed whispers swept across our ranks, a tidal wave of uncertainty washing over us like a cool breeze after a blistering summer day. Tito's expression morphed into a mask of disbelief. "What are they doing here?" he hissed, panic in his voice, a hint of fragility, utterly delicious. My pulse raced. Was this the cavalry, or merely a cruel coincidence that would soon turn our bravado into ridicule? But I knew we had to seize this moment. We were already in motion, and backing down was not on the menu tonight. Through the muffled sound of chaos, a tall figure stepped forward, uniform crisp and badge glinting under the fluorescent lights. "We had a report of disturbances," she said coolly, eyes scanning the crowd, landing on the olive-skinned menace of Tito. "What's going on here?" More murmurs of disbelief spread, each low rumble reinforcing the shrinkage of concern that enveloped Tito's fierce demeanor. As bewilderment marinated in the air, the officer's authoritarian presence added weight to our defiance. It was like we were lifting countless stones, carving our lives anew. Did the dominoes finally begin to fall in our favor? Would living in freedom mean we could reclaim our home? Or was this an illusion, a classical mirage retreating to the horizon? I pushed my hand into the air, summoning the crowd around me, their tension palpable and ready for the next chapter. "We are the residents of this building, and we are done. Done accommodating the reign of fear and intimidation emblazoned by this so-called king in a leather jacket." The unity pulsed, a palpable energy, and as those powerful words hit the crowd like a shot, the mantra of resilience commenced. "We stand together, or we fall apart. Our homes cannot be a playground for your tyranny." We shivered with anticipation, matching the forceful thrum from the police officers as they began questioning Tito, the located authority gathering strength, coiling itself around our collective rebellion. Were we finally breaking free? Would the tides of justice sweep him away, leaving a shore lined with dignity and community? Only time would tell. With the police now present, I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins, a surge so intoxicating that I half expected fireworks to burst over our little battleground. The air was alive with squawking voices and barely contained excitement, but I was focused solely on Tito. For the first time since this madness began, I could see him faltering, a powerful figure momentarily stripped of his bravado, like a lion rendered toothless and idling on the savannah. He glanced from the officers to the crowd, his expression morphing from rage to an almost comical blend of confusion and fear. Oh, the joy of watching despair flicker in those piercing blue eyes. It was as if the universe had conspired for us, offering some divine comedy, a stand-up act of poetic justice unfolding before our eyes. My heart pounded a military march, driving me to press further into the fray. "Tito, the days of your little empire are numbered," I yelled, my voice echoing through the crowd, emboldening the tenants to chant back in fervor. Liability, negligence, sloth, injustice. It sounded like a jumbled chorus of reality checks, and who knew that the art of war could be this poetic? The officers were nodding, probably feeling that potent surge of, "Oh, this is a real situation," simmering in the air. Maya stood beside me, her presence like an electric cable sparking near the crowd. Our improvisational activism was evolving into something almost theatrical. Each shout from our neighbors fueled the flames hotter, the smiles flashing in the face of fear lending power to the moment. And just when I thought our momentum could not swell any higher, a haphazard snowball of confrontation erupted. One of the officers caught sight of a gang member trying to slink away into the shadows. Alex, a hapless thug not too bright and easily spooked. "Hey, where do you think you're going?" the officer barked, sealing his fate like a coffin nail. Alex froze, creature caught in headlights, and suddenly the entire crowd, neighbors, innocents, shifted a collective gaze onto him like vultures honing in on a dying creature. There was a cathartic frenzy as we all took a step forward, arms crossed, and schadenfreude exploding like confetti in the air. Alex's desperation to escape was as comical as it was tragic, like watching a clown slip on banana peels at a circus, destined for humiliation. "Those running shoes won't save you from reality," I yelled, bouncing off the crowd's energy like a pinball. Raw laughter erupted. Our collective chaos fed off it, transforming fear into exhilaration. How's it feel to be the vaunted warrior who's now a jester at the king's court? In that moment, every ounce of mental jail we had been kept in began to dismantle. The dynamic was shifting. We were no longer residents under siege, but a legion, armed with anger and resilience, ready to stake our claim. The officers were questioning gang members, gathering statements from witnesses, and the tiny, racing thoughts in my head morphed into a single mantra. We will not go silently. But for every leap of forward momentum, Tito was like the phoenix, trying to claw itself out of the ashes. His voice stabbed through my bravado. "You really think this changes anything?" he spat, clutching at the frayed edges of his authority like a child clutching a dying pet. "I'll be back. This is nothing." That revocation of his power was a buoyancy, a comedy sketch I couldn't stop laughing at. He had already begun to unravel, and the crumble exhibited a stark contradiction to his earlier bravado. The more he fought back the chaos, the deeper his unraveling became, like a cheap sweater snagged on a nail. A low murmur rippled through our ranks, emboldening us further, everyone leaning in to hear the drama unfold. Soon enough, I caught sight of our building's skimpy property manager lurking in the fringes, a slack-jawed bystander watching all the action unfold. I could practically hear his thoughts captivating him. Why did I never pay attention to the warnings about this rent-a-mob? As I pointed toward him, sharper than any blade, the crowd went wild. "Look at our leader, folks, the real-life version of Mr. McPanic." They responded with glee. Genuine laughter punctured the uneasiness. "Time to hand out some accountability. Where's our rent for safety gone? You've been a ghost in our lives for way too long." The giddying thrill of solidarity surged through me. The bastion of unchecked power had become nothing but a punching bag. Maya was shaking her head in disbelief, only to shoot me a cheeky grin. "Liam, this is downright droll. Your stand-up career awaits." My retort couldn't help but bubble over. "Oh, I live for the laughter. But for now, let's toast to justice. Maybe at a new bar with better security, huh?" The tempest of what was once tumultuous morphed into jubilance as the police finally finished processing Tito and his henchmen. Reality slid back into focus for our absurd community. The view from the plunging heights of fear pushed us above some higher ground, something bright and shiny we hadn't dared to touch for far too long. As the night wore on and the sun began to rise, we saw the police leading the remnants of the gang away, our laughter and cheers ringing out like a victorious anthem. We were no longer a whisper of the life we once lived, but a chorus of strong, united voices claiming our space and rights. "Let it be known," I declared, my own breathless pride surging with each word. "This is our community, our home, and we are done playing the victims. Together, we will hold accountable not just gangsters wearing leather, but complacent folks in suits, ensuring we are safe and sound." Justice had not just been served, but celebrated, propelling us into the dawn of a new day. That was the moment we stood reborn as something we never had thought possible. A family united in resilience. Did the chaos truly lead to the harmony we now embraced?